Have you ever wondered why a man only begins to see the value of a woman after she has already left? The memory of her burns brightest when her presence is no longer his to claim. What seems like sudden regret is never sudden at all. It is the body remembering the absence of nourishment it once ignored, the unconscious recoiling at the silence where once there was the steady pulse of feminine mystery. A man does not regret the woman who depended on him. He regrets the woman who needed no one, for her absence exposes the hollowness of his own unexamined life. He realizes too late that she was not a possession, but a mirror, one that reflected both his light and his shadows. When she leaves, that mirror shatters, and he is forced to look at himself without her gentle veil. The woman who needs no one is a paradox. She is tender yet untouchable, warm yet self-contained, offering connection without clinging. Jung might have called her the anima made flesh, the living embodiment of what men seek unconsciously but often do not understand. She awakens desire not because she offers herself freely, but because she reveals no fear of being alone. That indifference unsettles him. It touches something primal, something older than words. For deep within the psyche, man expects woman to orbit him, to complete him. When she orbits nothing but her own inner sun, he feels the ground shift. He senses her sovereignty, and sovereignty cannot be possessed. This sovereignty is not arrogance, it is not coldness. It is the quiet recognition that her worth is not defined by his presence. She does not collapse when he withdraws affection. She does not chase when he retreats. In her silence there is strength. In her absence there is weight. The woman who needs no one carries within her the archetype of the high priestess, the guardian of mystery who sits between worlds. She reminds man that love is a gift, not a contract. Her power is not in demanding but in choosing, and when she chooses herself, she becomes untouchable. Regret rises in the man not when he remembers her smile, but when he remembers the way she looked at him without need. There is a strange terror in realizing that you were never her lifeline, only her companion. This terror is often masked as anger, as blame, as dismissal, but underneath it lies grief. Grief that he mistook her wholeness for coldness. Grief that he mistook her independence for indifference. Grief that he walked away thinking she would wait. When he returns and finds the door closed, regret hardens into shame. You may have felt this yourself, the strange reversal where someone's absence teaches them more than your presence ever could. This is not manipulation. It is the natural law of psyche. What is abundant is undervalued. What is scarce becomes sacred. Your withdrawal is not punishment. It is revelation. By no longer feeding his unconscious hunger, you force him to confront it. In the dark hours, he sees what he refused to see when your light was near, that he was drawn not to your dependency, but to your freedom. He realizes that your power was never in giving him everything, but in needing nothing. There is a secret truth here, one that can feel dangerous to hold. When you live from the wholeness within you, you will unsettle others. You will stir their shadows because your presence does not confirm their illusions. To the unready man, your sovereignty feels like rejection. To the unconscious man, it feels like loss. But to the one who is awake, it feels like grace. And this is why regret is not guaranteed for every man. Only those who glimpse, even for a moment, the light of what they could not hold, will feel its absence like a wound. The archetype of the woman who needs no one is not about isolation. It is about inner abundance. It is about the refusal to bargain away your essence for scraps of attention. When you stand in that place, you do not repel love, you refine it. You create a natural filter where only those who can meet you in wholeness remain. This is why regret becomes so sharp for men who lose such a woman. They do not simply lose her, they lose the mirror that showed them who they could be. And what man does not grieve the loss of his own becoming? Imagine now the cracked mirror left behind after she walks away. In the shards, he sees his reflection fractured, distorted, unrecognizable. He longs for her to return and restore it, yet she does not come back. He is left with a choice: to keep bleeding on the broken glass, or to begin the painful work of piecing himself back together. This is the hidden gift she leaves him. Her absence is not just an emptiness. It is a call to individuation, the path Jung spoke of, where man confronts his own shadow and learns to become whole. And here lies the question that lingers in the silence after her departure. When a man is faced with the cracked mirror of himself, will he heal, or will he hide? The first days without her often feel like a fog. He moves through familiar rooms, but everything is muted, as though the air itself has thinned. At first he tells himself he is fine. He tells others she was never that important, that he has options, that she will regret leaving. But beneath the surface, the psyche keeps whispering. There is a phantom presence where she once stood, and his body remembers the rhythm of her silence. It is not her laughter he misses most, but the steadiness she carried, the way she belonged to herself even in his arms. Regret is rarely conscious at first. It emerges in small moments: a song that reminds him of her, the empty chair at a table, the way he catches himself rehearsing conversations in his head. He imagines calling her, saying things he never said when she was near. Yet every fantasy is haunted by the same truth: she does not need him. That realization digs into him like a thorn. He wonders why it unsettles him so deeply. The truth is, dependence is comforting. To be needed strokes the ego, softens insecurity. To be with a woman who needs no one exposes the fragility of his self-image. Her absence leaves him facing himself, raw and unsheltered. For the woman, this is where power lies, not in domination, but in her refusal to collapse. Men regret losing her because her wholeness calls forth their own, and once gone, they feel the void. Jung spoke of projection, the unconscious act of casting our inner images onto others. The man projected onto her the role of savior, of mother, of validation. But when she stood apart, sovereign, those projections shattered. Without realizing it, he was confronted with his anima not as a fantasy, but as a living being who would not conform. And the psyche does not forget such encounters. They etch themselves into memory like sacred wounds. You may know the sensation of being misread, of someone mistaking your independence for arrogance or your calm for distance. Yet beneath their misunderstanding lies the truth. They see in you what they cannot yet claim in themselves. They may resent it in the moment, but later, when silence presses in, they feel the loss. This is why his regret grows not over weeks but over months, sometimes years. It blooms slowly, like a bruise spreading under the skin. He sees her face in the faces of others, but none carry the same weight. He realizes too late that her value was not in how she loved him, but in how she loved herself. Regret is a teacher that speaks in whispers at first and screams later. In the beginning, he tells himself he will replace her. He seeks distraction, another body, another laugh, another touch. But the psyche is not fooled. Repetition only sharpens absence. Every new encounter collapses under comparison, for none can mirror what she embodied. It is not perfection he misses, it is depth. It is not beauty he mourns, it is sovereignty. And sovereignty once seen cannot be unseen. For the woman, the danger lies in doubting this truth. There is a temptation to soften her strength, to pretend need in order to soothe the fear of being abandoned. But this false need is poison. It binds her to men who do not yet know themselves and robs her of her archetypal fire. The high priestess archetype whispers, "Stay still, hold the silence, trust the mirror." For when you remain whole, you give others a chance to awaken. If they cannot, their regret will be their lesson, not your burden. There is a curious alchemy in absence. What he once overlooked becomes luminous when denied. Her independence, once irritating, now haunts him. Her restraint, once misjudged as cold, now glows as wisdom. He regrets not because she withheld, but because she revealed what love could look like beyond dependency. The irony is sharp. He wanted her to need him, yet now he longs for the very wholeness that once unsettled him. But here lies the turning point. Regret can either enslave or transform. For some men, it becomes a spiral, an endless loop of blame and nostalgia. They curse her for leaving, label her cold, insist she was never special. Yet the more they deny, the deeper the wound festers. For others, regret becomes initiation. They remember the cracked mirror she left behind and realize it is not hers to fix. Slowly, painfully, they gather the shards. They begin to confront the shadow, the child within who feared abandonment, the ego that fed on being needed. And in this process, they discover something she had known all along. A human being can be whole without possession. The woman who needs no one does not wait for him to understand. Her path moves forward, carrying her deeper into herself. But the echo of her sovereignty lingers in his life like a forgotten key. It presses on him in quiet hours, reminding him that she was not lost by accident but by blindness. And blindness, once named, demands awakening. Yet the question remains unanswered. When the moment of awakening comes, will he rise to meet the standard she set by simply existing as herself? Or will he cling to the old patterns that drove her away? There is a peculiar cruelty in memory. It does not preserve things as they were, but as they might have been. For the man who loses the woman who needs no one, regret is sharpened not by what was shared, but by what was possible. He remembers the moments when she stood beside him, self-contained, radiant in her independence, and he realizes she was inviting him, not to complete her, but to complete himself. This invitation is what he declined without knowing. And so regret gnaws at him, not only for the loss of her presence, but for the loss of the man he could have become in her presence. The woman who needs no one does not posture with strength, nor armor herself against love. Her strength is woven from another fabric, self-intimacy, the long hours of learning her own depths, the quiet practice of being at home with herself. This unnerves him because it shines a light on his own restlessness. Where he seeks distraction, she finds stillness. Where he looks outward for validation, she roots inward. He begins to realize, often too late, that he did not just lose a partner, he lost a guide. She did not teach through words, but through presence. The high priestess archetype does not instruct directly. She embodies mystery, and through that embodiment, others are either awakened or exposed. This awakening is never gentle. For the man, it may come as sudden waves of anger, the raw wound of rejection. He may tell himself she thought she was too good, that she was selfish, that she gave nothing. But anger is a mask for pain. Beneath it lies the sting of recognizing that he was given a gift he could not receive. That sting is what lingers long after his defenses collapse. When he sees her in the world again, or even when he imagines it, her untouchability cuts him. He knows now she is beyond his reach, not because another man took his place, but because she never needed a place to begin with. For you, this truth may feel both liberating and dangerous. To need no one is not to live in isolation, but to stand so firmly in your essence that you can welcome love without losing yourself. The fear that arises, what if no one stays? What if independence pushes others away? Is the fear of abandonment carried from childhood, the little girl within who once learned that to be loved, she must depend. But sovereignty is the healing of that wound. To need no one is not to reject intimacy, but to meet it from fullness rather than lack. And from this fullness, connection becomes choice, not survival. The man's regret is the echo of this fullness. He recognizes that he did not have to rescue her, and he mourns the absence of that role, for it gave him meaning. But meaning built on being needed is fragile. It collapses when faced with a woman who already carries her own foundation. Regret is therefore the collapse of his borrowed identity. When she walks away, he is stripped of the illusion that her dependence made him strong. All that remains is the question: Who is he without being needed? And here a deeper truth surfaces. Men do not regret losing a woman because of what she gave them. They regret because of what they lost the chance to give themselves through her. She was the cracked mirror, showing him both his beauty and his brokenness. She was the key he refused to turn. Now, in her absence, he sees the locked door and realizes he is the one who must open it. Whether he does or not becomes the measure of his growth. For the woman, there is temptation to look back, to soften, to return when regret pulls at him. But the high priestess never walks backward. She knows that regret is his initiation, not hers. To return too soon would rob him of the lesson. She understands that her absence is as sacred as her presence, that silence is sometimes more transformative than words. And so she moves forward, carrying her own mystery, trusting that those who are capable of meeting her sovereignty will appear, and those who are not will remain behind, learning through their longing. In the end, regret is not punishment but prophecy. It foretells what could have been, pressing the man toward his own confrontation with selfhood. It is the cracked mirror calling him to gather the fragments, but whether he listens or not is uncertain. For some, regret becomes the soil of transformation. For others, it becomes the cage of bitterness. And so the tension deepens. What happens when a man finally sees in her absence the truth he could not hold in her presence? Will he face the shadow she revealed, or will he spend the rest of his days haunted by a woman who needed no one, and therefore could never be possessed? There is a moment that arrives unannounced, long after the arguments are over and the excuses have dissolved. It is the quiet hour when his defenses falter and the truth presses against him with the weight of inevitability. He sees her again in memory, her stillness, her gaze that did not beg, her silence that did not collapse under his absence. It is then that regret transforms into something sharper, the awareness that she was never clinging, never pleading, only offering. And what he mistook for detachment was in fact freedom, the kind of freedom he himself had always feared. The psyche has a strange way of working. Jung understood that what we reject in others often hides what we fear in ourselves. When the man dismissed her independence as pride, he was really rejecting his own inability to stand alone. When he accused her of not needing him, it was his own dependency he was trying to mask. Now, in her absence, the shadow rises. The truth he avoided becomes unavoidable. He did not lose her because she was too much, but because she refused to be less. That realization cuts deeper than loss itself. For the woman, there is often confusion when faced with such regret. She wonders if she was too cold, too distant, too unwilling to bend. Yet if she searches within, she finds the answer in her body's memory. She remembers the time she could have chased, but something within her resisted. That resistance was not cruelty but self-trust. It was the voice of the archetype whispering, "Do not abandon yourself for love." This is the essence of sovereignty. It is not about rejection of others, but refusal to reject oneself. Regret haunts him not because she withdrew love, but because she refused to abandon herself in order to keep him. That refusal is what sets her apart from all the others. For in a world where many are willing to compromise their essence for attention, she chose a different path. She embodied what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, distinct, complete. Her wholeness threatened him, yet it also drew him in. And now, in the silence of her absence, it becomes the very thing he longs for. You may know this power already, the strange gravity that comes when you stop performing need, when you no longer chase or plead, when you simply remain rooted in your own worth. At first, it feels terrifying, as if people will vanish. And some do, but what remains is pure. For the ones who stay are not bound by your weakness, but drawn by your strength. And those who leave often return in silence, carrying the weight of their regret like a shadow that follows them. The high priestess archetype is not concerned with possession. She knows that what is hers cannot be taken and what is not meant for her will fall away. This is why her power feels so unbearable to men who expect dependence. She does not cling when they withdraw. She does not crumble when they leave. Instead, she remains, carrying her mystery forward, and mystery once touched is never forgotten. That is why regret lingers, for he did not simply lose a person, he lost an encounter with the sacred. But the sacred does not beg to be recognized. It waits. It stands silent, watching, allowing each soul to choose. The man who loses her must choose, remain chained to nostalgia, replaying what might have been, or confront the mirror she left behind. He may resist it, but he cannot escape it. The memory of her sovereignty is a seed, and seeds do not dissolve. They wait in the dark, pressing for growth. Whether he waters it or lets it rot is his decision. For her, the path is clear. She does not need to monitor his regret or witness his growth. Her task is to continue embodying her wholeness, to continue walking as one who belongs to herself. Each step forward deepens her mystery, and those who encounter her will either rise to meet her or fall away in confusion. This is the quiet sorting of souls. Those who seek ownership cannot stand in her presence. Those who seek partnership are transformed by it. And yet the question remains. When regret has stripped him bare, when he has faced the emptiness left in her wake, will he step through the doorway she unknowingly opened, or will he turn back into the shadows of denial? Regret deepens in layers like water soaking into the earth. At first it is loud, filled with anger and denial, the restless clamor of ego refusing to admit loss. But time has its way of dissolving noise into silence, and in that silence the truth becomes undeniable. He remembers not the arguments, not the flaws, not the moments of friction, but the presence of a woman who stood complete within herself. He remembers the quiet way she carried her power, never advertised, never explained, only lived. And that memory unsettles him, because it reveals the poverty of his own half-lived life. The woman who needs no one becomes unforgettable precisely because she is not dependent on being remembered. She moves through the world like a flame contained in glass, visible, radiant, untouchable. Men regret her because they cannot replace her. They may try, reaching for new faces, new bodies, new distractions, but none of them carry the same stillness, the same refusal to collapse into need. What they find in D are mirrors of their ego, partners who echo their desire to be central, adored, indispensable. What they cannot find is the mirror of sovereignty, and that absence gnaws at them. For you, the question is not whether regret will follow him, it will, but whether you will allow it to define you. Too many women shrink when faced with male regret, mistaking it for proof of their value. But your value does not require his recognition. His regret is his teacher, not your trophy. It is the shadow reminding him of what he could not hold, the invitation he ignored, the path he refused to walk. You are not responsible for the lessons others must learn through loss. Jung once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The woman who needs no one is that catalyst. Her presence disrupts, ignites, exposes. She does not fit into the mold of dependency, and because of this she awakens what is dormant in others. For some men, this awakening leads to growth. For others, it leads only to regret. But either way, she changes them. And change, once begun, cannot be undone. There is a kind of myth that echoes this truth. In ancient stories, heroes often encounter goddesses or priestesses who offer them wisdom, but only once. If the hero fails to recognize the gift, she vanishes, leaving him with nothing but longing and memory. The lesson is always the same. The divine does not wait. The sacred is not bargained with. It is received or lost. The woman who needs no one embodies this myth in modern flesh. Her sovereignty is the divine invitation, and when unrecognized, it withdraws. What remains is not punishment, but the ache of missed destiny. In her own life, she must learn to resist the temptation of softening into false need. There will be moments when the pressure is strong, when voices around her say she is too distant, too hard, too unwilling to bend. But the truth rests in the stillness she feels when she listens inward. That stillness is her compass. It tells her she is aligned, even if misunderstood. And the longer she honors it, the more magnetic she becomes. For people sense the difference between borrowed strength and rooted strength. Borrowed strength crumbles under stress. Rooted strength grows deeper in silence. Regret often transforms men into storytellers of their own downfall. They recount the one who got away, the mysterious woman who never needed them, the one they could not forget. They speak of her with reverence or bitterness, but always with intensity. What they rarely admit aloud is the fear beneath the story, the fear that they lost not just a woman, but the chance to meet themselves more deeply. For her sovereignty illuminated their lack, and lack, once exposed, does not fade with time. Yet the story is not his alone. For the woman, hearing of his regret can stir something too. There may be a flicker of guilt, or the temptation to return, or the curiosity of what could be different now. But the high priestess does not walk back into shadows once she has stepped into light. She knows that regret is not transformation. Transformation is a path walked, not a memory spoken. Unless he has faced his mirror, unless he has pieced together the fragments of himself, his regret is only nostalgia, and nostalgia cannot sustain love. And so the thread pulls tighter. She continues forward, he lingers in memory. The cracked mirror lies waiting. The question remains, will he dare to gather the shards and face the cuts they bring, or will he keep staring at the fragments, longing for her reflection to appear again? Time has a way of stripping illusions. At first, regret feels like a wound tied to her absence, but slowly he realizes it is tied to himself. The more he replays her image, the more he sees not what she did, but what he failed to do. He remembers moments when she stood silent in her truth, and he chose comfort over courage. He recalls her steady eyes that asked nothing, and instead of meeting them with depth, he filled the silence with distraction. Regret sharpens as he sees that it was never about losing her. It was about losing the chance to rise. The woman who needs no one carries a secret weight. She forces men to confront themselves. She does not intend it, she does not demand it, but her presence strips away excuses. She does not need saving, so the savior cannot play his role. She does not collapse, so the controller cannot feel powerful. She does not beg, so the ego cannot feed. What remains is the raw truth. He must meet her as an equal or not at all. For many men, this is unbearable. And so they turn away, not realizing that in doing so, they abandon the part of themselves that long to grow. Her strength is not loud, not flamboyant, but subterranean, like roots that dig deep into the unseen soil. She does not declare independence as rebellion, she breathes it as air. And this quiet certainty unsettles. Because it reveals a different standard of love, one not born of lack but of choice. A man accustomed to being central, to being needed for survival, feels disoriented in her orbit. When she walks away, his disorientation becomes despair, for he realizes she was never circling him. She was circling her own center. For the woman, this path is not always easy. There are nights when the silence feels heavy, when doubt whispers that independence will mean loneliness. But doubt is the shadow's trick. It confuses sovereignty with isolation. To need no one is not to close the door to intimacy. It is to keep the door open without chaining yourself to whoever walks through. True intimacy can only grow in that space, where love is chosen freely, not demanded. The woman who holds this truth within her body is not untouchable out of coldness. She is untouchable because she cannot be bought by fear. And this is precisely what regret teaches him. He realizes slowly and painfully that he was never chosen because she needed him. He was chosen because she wanted him. That distinction, once grasped, breaks him open. For what man does not crave to be wanted for himself, apart from his usefulness, apart from his role? And yet he squandered it because he mistook sovereignty for distance. Regret blooms as he sees the treasure he held and failed to recognize. Jung wrote of individuation as the process of becoming whole. The woman who needs no one embodies this process in living form. She has faced her shadow, tended to the little girl within, embraced solitude until it became a source of strength rather than fear. To encounter her is to be confronted with wholeness. For a man unprepared, this confrontation feels like judgment, but it is really invitation. She calls him silently to do the same, to meet himself, to grow roots, to walk without leaning. And when he refuses, when he flees, regret becomes his companion, for deep down he knows he abandoned not only her, but himself. For her, the lesson is different. She learns that her sovereignty is not a curse but a filter. It draws out the ones who are ready and repels the ones who are not. She does not need to chase or persuade because the truth of who she is will do the work. And though it costs her some connections, it preserves her essence. Sovereignty always comes with solitude, but solitude is not emptiness. It is space. Space for real love, space for depth, space for the rare souls who can meet her there. The man's regret, then, is not simply loss but prophecy. It whispers of who he could have been, what he might still become. The cracked mirror remains, waiting for him to gather it, to bleed on the shards, to rebuild a self not reliant on being needed. But many men do not take this path. They linger in nostalgia, romanticizing her as the one who got away, turning memory into myth rather than transformation into action. They circle the fragments but never touch them. And yet a few do. A few feel the sting of regret deeply enough to wake. They realize that to ever stand beside a woman who needs no one, they too must learn to need no one. They must meet her from fullness, not from hunger. And this is the hidden gift of her absence. It becomes his initiation into becoming whole. But the question burns, unanswered. Will he bear the pain of becoming whole, or will he forever live in the shadow of a woman who needed no one, haunted by the door he never dared to open? There comes a day when even regret grows quiet. It no longer rages, no longer pleads, no longer spins stories of blame. Instead, it sits like a stone in his chest, heavy and unmoving. He has said all he can to himself, replayed the memories until they blurred, sought distraction until exhaustion left him hollow. And still, she remains, not in body, not in conversation, but as a presence etched into the architecture of his psyche. The woman who needs no one becomes less a memory of her and more a reminder of what he could not embody. She becomes a symbol, a myth living inside him, pointing toward the path he avoided. The irony is that she does not think of herself in this way. She does not walk through the world trying to be mythic, trying to be unforgettable. She simply lives from her center, trusting her own roots. And yet, it is precisely this simplicity, this unshakable self-belonging, that gives her presence such weight. He regrets not only because she is gone, but because he cannot replicate what she carried. Other women may love him, may even adore him, but the flavor is different. Dependency, flattery, or adoration cannot match the strange intoxication of someone who could leave at any time and yet chose to stay. That is the paradox of her sovereignty. It makes her both untouchable and irresistible. For you, this realization matters. It teaches that your power does not lie in convincing someone of your worth. It lies in embodying it so deeply that they cannot forget. The one who regrets your absence is not your responsibility. His journey is his own. Your task is to remain aligned with the voice inside that whispers, "Do not shrink, do not trade wholeness for approval." For every time you do, the ache that follows is your own regret, not his. Sovereignty spares you from that ache. It anchors you in a truth no one can take. Jung spoke often of shadow, the parts of ourselves we exile, deny, or project onto others. The man who loses the woman who needs no one encounters his shadow in her absence. Her independence exposes his fear of insignificance. Her silence exposes his hunger for control. Her refusal to collapse exposes the emptiness of his ego. And when she leaves, these shadows do not vanish with her. They rise, unrelenting, until he either confronts them or drowns in nostalgia. This is why regret feels eternal. It is not her ghost haunting him. It is his own unclaimed self. Meanwhile, the woman who holds her sovereignty walks differently. She does not live guarded. She does not wall herself off, but she carries her boundaries like sacred ground. To enter her life is to step into a temple. The man who cannot respect the silence finds himself restless. The man who demands worship leaves unsatisfied. But the one who can stand beside her without fear discovers that intimacy is not loss of self, but the meeting of two complete beings. This is rare, and because it is rare, those who lose it cannot forget. Regret, then, is a teacher disguised as pain. It shows him the cost of unconsciousness. It shows him the ache of missed opportunity. It shows him the hollowness of chasing what flatters instead of what awakens. But whether he learns from it is uncertain. Some men spend their lives bound to this lesson, speaking of her as legend but never rising into the man she saw glimpses of. Others take the wound seriously, letting it bleed them into growth, allowing the pain to carve away the false layers until they finally meet themselves. For the woman, none of this requires effort. She does not orchestrate his regret, does not calculate her absence, does not return to measure his progress. She trusts the deeper current. What is hers cannot be taken. What is not hers will pass. Sovereignty frees her from the cycle of proving, chasing, or justifying. It allows her to move forward, carrying her wholeness like a lantern. And wherever she goes, those who see the light will either shrink from it or rise to meet it. At last, the cracked mirror returns. It waits for him in silence, unyielding. Each fragment gleams with both the man he was and the man he could be. He knows the truth now. She will not come back to piece it together for him. Regret has delivered him here, but it cannot walk him through. Only his hands can risk the cuts. Only his courage can endure the bleeding. And this is the final revelation of the woman who needs no one. She was never his possession, but his initiation. The silence lingers, and one question remains. When faced with the broken mirror of his own becoming, will he finally gather the shards, or will he choose to live forever haunted by her shadow?